Hello. Now, I was planning on moving on from the New Orleans and not really touching the ship again, but people did request a tier 10 matchmaking or a basically up-tiered game. And I have the perfect example here. In fact, if you look at my team, I'm the only tier 8. There are literally no other tier 8s on my entire team. We have only tier 9s and tier 10s. On the enemy team, they have two poor cruisers who are in the same situation that I am, and everyone else is tier 9 or 10. So obviously this is like nightmare status when it comes to matchmaking. This is the New Orleans already isn't an easy cruiser to play, and in matchmaking like this you of course have to be on your toes. I got to spawn in the middle of the map on hotspot, which of course means that, well, you have to spend the first couple of minutes sailing to one of the sides, because if you're dumb enough to open fire in the middle of the map, then you get focused from every possible angle and you're gonna struggle to be able to angle against all of them. So it's better to just hold your fire until you get closer to these islands, at which point you have more cover to hide behind. In this case, because of the limited range of US cruisers, I can shoot without being spotted. Shooting the Montana, hoping to get a fire, but honestly just landing one shell since he was behind the island. I think it turned out, or whatever. Now, what's important to note here is that all battleships have been spotted on the minimap. This is something you need to keep track of when you're a cruiser, especially if you're low tier 1. We can see, well, I got spotted, so I popped my radar, of course. So since I already knew there was a DD here, so with my short spotting range, it's obvious that he would be in my radar range if I popped it. The reason, though, I'm able to play as aggressive as I am now, I am peeking at this closest Montana to see in case he's aiming at me, or in case he got firing angles. You note those peaks to the right, constantly keeping track of him to make sure I'm not accidentally sailing in a straight line while someone is actually aiming at me. In general, though, what's important, the reason for me pushing in and playing this aggressive is the fact that all these battleships have been seen on the minimap. They have 5 battleships, we have seen all 5 battleships. They have been spotted south of B and A, and the battleships that they had down south of C, the Montana, has decided to lemming train and abandon C and move the other way. And this is something you need to recognize. This is very common. Battleships want to lemming where everyone else is going. And when you recognize this, when you see that they are doing this, this is a chance to exploit it, which is exactly what I'm doing here. I am rushing the Fletcher. First volley of torps spotted, so I know he still has 5 torps left. I know he still has 1 more volley of torps left that I have to play safe around. Now I'm assuming he's sailing towards the island, so that's why I'm blind firing in here. You see I adjust my crosshair a bit more to the right, since I'm expecting him to move behind the island, and I guess correctly. I do land a hit on him, firing some more, and I land another 2 hits. I am plane spotted now, though. As soon as I'm plane spotted, I expect torpedoes, so I turn hard right to dodge any possible torps coming my way, as well as continually harassing him in the smoke. You can see how much damage I've done. He was at 20k health, and I've pretty much done all of that health to him. And turning in allows me to dodge all the shells. Now, I do a bit of hip firing there, and I aim slightly too low, so some of the shells miss, which allows him to move a bit further than I would like, but I do hunt him down and kill him off before he can run off. And this kind of move, playing aggressive like this in a cruiser, well, first of all, this is of course only really possible in radar cruisers, especially the US ones, because they have the concealment to get close enough to be able to make these kinds of moves. But the reason I was able to do this was map awareness. That's what it always comes down to. It doesn't matter if you're playing low, if you're the top tier, or if you're in this case the only tier 8 on your team. Map awareness is key. There are usually only max 5 battleships on the enemy team. That's kind of how matchmaking is designed. It's kind of soft capped that you can only really get 5 battleships. So if you can see them all on the map and none of them are covering your side, then that already opens up the possibility of pushing quite aggressively. Midway trying to drop me, I turn right to make sure that he has to drop across my ship instead of dropping down the length of it, and I of course pop defensive AA to start harassing and shredding those planes. More bombers are coming my way, but I still have defensive AA active. I am, of course, as I've said in my earlier New Orleans commentaries, I recommend running the increased AA duration module on the New Orleans, and you can see how useful it's being right here in still being active in shooting down those bombs and scaring away these torpedo planes as well, because, well, I'm still shredding planes. Well, shredding is perhaps laying it on a bit thick, but I do shoot down, what, 7 planes? And these are tier 10 midway planes, so certainly not something to be entirely forgotten about. I do shoot down 8 planes, and I mean, considering his full attack squad is going to be, what, about 18-20 planes, so shooting down almost half of them when he tries to strike is certainly very annoying to him, and of course helps both me and anyone else I'm trying to protect with the defensive AA. Still though, recognizing these kind of weaknesses in the enemy lines and then exploiting them is kind of a good way of trying to earn some of this XP. And another thing I'm doing here is, well, I see the enemy is now trying to push in, so I use cover. I use island cover. I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna start shooting this Montana in the broadside. If I push any further out, then I open myself up to being shot by all the people in their spawn. But this position, the only one who can actually shoot me is the enemy Montana. So this is once again map awareness and positioning, which is another key factor in playing cruisers. Now the DPM on the New Orleans isn't exactly impressive when it comes to fighting a tier 10 battleship. I mean, I'm not really doing much more than tickling him, but I'm helping my team. And of course, since you're lower tier, and if you damage tier 10s, you get additional bonus XP. So any damage you do, even though it might not seem that significant, helps your team, and it gives you much better rewards, because ultimately, if you are playing as a tier 8 in tier 10 matchmaking, I mean, it's admirable to go for the I'm going to carry my team to victory approach, and that's usually the approach I try to get, but realistically, you should never assume that you will be able to carry them, because tier 10 ships have such a massive advantage over tier 9s. We are talking something like a huge 40% increase in health pools, usually double or more DPM. We are better upgrades, better radars, everything. Like they have such a huge leg up on you in all terms of performance when it comes to armament, penetration, all of these things. So trying to carry against these kind of ships is going to be extremely hard. So what your goal should be is trying to maximize your own gains. Well, of course, winning the game is one of the best gains, because, well, you get a nice multiplier on all your XP if you win the game. But more importantly, trying to be as useful as possible in multiple different ways. This includes hunting down DDs, killing DDs, capping, as I also did, shooting down planes, more harassing DDs, and in general, just trying to harass any ships that I see. In this case though, Fletcher backs off, I can push into the cap. There looks like there's some bombers. Are they gonna go for my Missouri? I have my defensive AA active again. Once again, and trying to help your team in general. You don't want to be too much of a solo warrior type of player when you're playing when you're the lower tier. Try to play with your team. You don't have to be the star player, because when you're up tiered, you're already gonna have a hard time. Just try to be a team player. And in this case, I see the midways trying to strike the Missouri. I pop defensive AA, I focus fire the torpedo bombers, of course. I spread out the bombs so they don't really land any hits, and by spreading out the torpedo bombers, you can see how wide of a spread the torps are coming down in. The pattern is wide enough. Even though he turned away, he only ended up eating 2, and he ate no bombs at all. So the defensive AA kind of saved my battleship buddy there. He even uses the thank you command, because he's obviously quite grateful for the help there and being able to survive that. So that's the kind of thing you can do. Also, I'm using my concealment here to secure this cap, something that once again you can do in ships like the Chapayev and the New Orleans, because while they are only tier 8, they are very, very stealthy. Missouri and 2 Missouris. I don't really want to be fighting either of these, but what I want to be doing is resetting them. I don't want it. It's a good way of getting some more XP for myself. Since ultimately, if you're in a level, if you're playing a tier 8 non-premium, more than likely you are leveling the ship and you're trying to advance the line. And the best way to gain XP is playing the objectives. Once again, this is very valuable for the team, but it's also very valuable for yourself. We are resetting the capture point, we're making sure the enemy can't cap it, and at the same time we're providing some good harassment on them. A fire here, some HE spam here and there, just being annoyances in general. I started firing that other guy as well, this guy damage cons, and we're gonna keep harassing them, but at the same time I'm of course staying angled. I'm staying angled away from them. I'm not taking unnecessary risks. We got Kurfürst and other tanky ships that can do this tanking much better than I can, so there's absolutely no point in me attempting to be the tank here. Let's see if we can reach the Montana. He's trying to cap. He's hiding behind the island, hiding behind his body, see if he can cap A. Gonna see if we can stop him from getting it. Lobbing some shells over the island. And that's another 3 cap resets with the 3 shells. Oh well, I land more than that on him. And now they are unable to secure the cap. And they can't just park there and wait for the cap because they're being shot at the entire time. So they are kind of forced to move out, and in this way I'm helping my team because it's still actually 6 versus 6. It's 6 versus 6 in ships, so the game is quite close. The Montana lobs a volley my way, instantly chunks out almost half my health, and that's really life as a tier 8 cruiser in tier 10 matchmaking. When these big battleships look at you, you're not gonna have fun, and that's why we've already been sailing away for a long time. That's why we've been kiting away and disengaging, and we're generally just trying to reset and trying to be an annoyance, but we're not trying to single-handedly sink any of these ships, because we know it's unlikely to happen. Mogami might have a better chance if he gets some torps off to single-handedly sink some ship, but in general those are very rare occasions, and in general no tier 8 cruiser should really be going into the battle with the expectations of being able to solo carry it, because it's going to be very, very hard. So what you want to go in is this safe team playing attitude, where your goal is, while you want to win, your goal in general is to maximize your own gains and play quite safe. Battleships and DDs kind of have an easier time in tier 8, even though they of course have a hard time. Everyone has a hard time when they're up against tier 10s. They don't suffer the same way that cruisers tend to do. Cruiser tier 8 is very challenging. Cruiser tier 8 as a New Orleans is especially challenging, but you do have your team tools, which are of course defensive AA and radar, and being able to use them and help your team can give you a surprisingly nice amount of XP, especially if you play the way I'm doing here. I'm playing safe. Note that I've never really taken any big risks. Like pushing into sea the way I did, kind of YOLO pushing alone into sea, might have looked risky. And for an outsider, if someone looking in, I mean someone watching my stream for example, what the hell is charging sea alone in tier 10, like is he insane? But it was never really that high risk of a move, because all the enemy ships had been spotted on the minimap. And that's such an important thing, keeping an eye on the minimap, because that allows you to see these openings. It allows you to create these openings yourself. Of course, when you 1 versus 1 at DD, you have to dodge the torps in order to be successful in it, but ultimately, if he's all alone, that shouldn't really be too hard, because you kind of know where he's going to torp. He's going to torp you, you know where the direction of the torps, and all you need to do is not basically sail full broadside into them and catch every single one, and you should be quite fine. I catch off the Mogami. Mogami gives me too much broadside, and of course American AP, as I mentioned in previous New Orleans commentaries, is extremely strong. The Missouri dies as well, and I'm sailing towards where I think the Midway is, hoping to intercept any planes sent towards this Montana, so I can basically start shredding them early before he can drop. And seeing as the game is about to end, I pop defensive AA to shoot down a couple of more planes just before it ends to see if I can farm some additional XP, because ultimately of course we want to gain XP since we're leveling. The game ends, only 65,000 damage. As I said, damage is not really going to be your goal when you face tier 10s. The only ship cruiser that can really consistently farm damage against tier 10s is pretty much the Kutuzov. And that's because it can ignore angling with HE plus IFHE plus fires, and it has a smoke to hide itself. Everyone else, even including the Edinburgh, is going to kind of struggle getting any sort of consistent damage against these higher tiers. And that's perfectly okay. You shouldn't be going into this, but the key point here is, of course, the XP. 14.4k XP. Now, this is actually quite a lot, considering this wasn't my daily win either. In fact, if we move on, well, first of all, we can look at the fact that I have 16 cap defenses, and I got 2 assisted captures as well. One of them could have been a solo cap if the midway bombers hadn't reset my cap, but still, if we move on to the base XP, the only tier 8 on the entire team is topping the scoreboard easily by a huge margin. On 2.7k base XP. The guy who's closest to me has below 2k, which is the Kurfürst. So even though my damage isn't that insane, and even though I didn't really make too many of these big risky maneuvers, what I did was play very heavily for the team, and I played very heavily for these XP rewarding objectives. I killed a DD, I reset the DD, I helped cap 2 different points, I helped reset capture points, I helped shoot down planes, and in general I just did this little chip damage left, right and center, which wasn't too much damage, but it all adds up. And that was an easy 2.7k base XP game, whereas the only tier 8 in a map that, well, I guess it's pretty okay for this, but the matchmaking certainly wasn't okay. And if in fact if we look at the detailed report, you note that I didn't take too much damage. In fact, the 3 hits from the Montana was the biggest damage I took, but most of the time I tried to make myself as uninteresting of a target as possible. And you saw whenever I was actually fighting any of these ships, I was either in cover or towards the end when I was shooting the Missouris and the Montanas, I was angled away and sailing away, making me a very non-threatening target and also a very unattractive target to shoot at, because unlikely to score any citadels or any big hits, because, well, why shoot the New Orleans 14 km away who's sailing away from you when there's a battleship pushing in towards you that's 10 km away? Of course you're going to shoot the closer target, and that's the kind of attitude you need to have. Not try to go for those YOLO plays, but more try to survive and try to farm that XP, because ultimately, of course, you want to advance to tier 9 and ultimately tier 10. Anyway, that was my tier 10 New Orleans commentary. That was requested so much that I decided to feature it as well, because of course playing against tier 10s as a tier 8 is a pretty huge part of the game for every cruiser player as they are hoping to level and of course hoping to advance up to the higher tiers, where life gets a bit easier, but not really that much easier, because let's face it, cruisers in general are not that forgiving. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, I hope you enjoyed it.